Hello everyone, and welcome back. Well, after defeating the dastardly boss Cass and saving all of Australia 2 whole times, Ty is back for round 3. But this time, birds and lizards are the least of his problem, as now Australia is being threatened by a much more serious foe, the Quinkan. With these interdimensional interlopers on the loose, Ty and friends sure have their hands full, but old habits die hard, and so Ty is once again insisting on foregoing his trusty boomerangs to prove a point or something. Can you beat Ty 3, Night of the Quinkan, without using boomerangs? The rules are simple. We can't use our boomerangs for any combat. This is slightly different to the last games in the series, as this time I'm not just referring to throwing the rangs. Combat in this game has been revised to include melee, utilizing our rangs to smack enemies upside the head. This is generally the fastest way to deal with enemies, definitely faster than biting them at least, and I was tempted to allow it, since in previous runs I have allowed other uses for the boomerangs, like gliding, climbing, and swimming. This time though, to make things a little bit more interesting, I've decided to disallow the use of boomerangs in any combat role, once again limiting our fighting abilities to just biting, though the aforementioned gliding, swimming, and climbing will still be allowed. This time I'm back to playing on my ancient PC, since Ty 3 never got a port for the Switch, so if there are any graphical issues, that's probably the reason why. Ty 3 was always my favourite one as a kid, primarily because it was the only one that I ever owned. I only got to play the other two at my cousin's house. In general though, I think this one is considered less favourably by the fans, due to its edgy attitude and scattershot gameplay mechanics. I'm kinda curious to see how my opinion might be shifted by the end of this run. In terms of the challenge though, I don't have much hope. If Ty 2 is anything to go off, this challenge will end when we get to the first boss, but who knows, I guess we'll just have to wait and see. So, can you beat Ty 3 boomerangless? Just like in Ty 2, we get thrown straight into the action here. Ty is informed by Nandu Gilly, that dude from the intro to the first game, that his home dimension, the Dreaming, is under attack by evil creatures called the Quinkan. He asks Ty and Shazza for help saving the Dreaming, and being the kind souls that they are, they can't help but to agree. Unfortunately, the Quinkan are a much more serious threat than any of the enemies that Ty is used to dealing with, so before we can fight them, we need to track down a gauntlet that'll allow us to damage them. This intro in the Dreaming gives us a chance to refamiliarize ourselves with the controls a little. It plays identically to the last game, so if you've played that one, this should be pretty easy to get the hang of. One difference that I did notice is that they seem to have, for the most part, removed that annoying little dodge enemies could do in Ty 1 and 2. This made dealing with the frills in those games a nightmare, as it could take several attempts to land a bite, but here almost all of my bites landed first try, making the combat much easier. Though for this opening segment, if you want, you can just leave it to Shazza to clear the way, since she seems to have followed in Ty's boomerangless ideology, discarding her rangs out for a straight up gun. Jeez, if I could get my hands on one of those things, this would probably be a pretty easy challenge. Eventually we reach the area holding the special gauntlet, and well, you remember when I said that this challenge would probably end with the first boss? Well, I have good news. I can confirm that that's not the case, as the challenge actually ends right here. In order to free the gauntlet from its cage, we need to chuck a rang in it. A bite simply won't do the trick, meaning, nope, it's not possible to beat Ty 3 Night of the Quinkan without boomerangs. I might have expected this outcome, but still, it's pretty disheartening for it to come so early. Of course, there's still the question of how many rang uses does it take, so let's continue on. With our new gloves on hand, we can now fight the Quinkan. Oh yeah, these things that we were fighting until now aren't actually the Quinkan. Actually, I don't know what they are or what they're doing here, and they completely disappear from the game after this point, so I guess it'll just forever remain a mystery. The main difference when fighting Quinkan is that, unlike most enemies who go down in a single hit, the Quinkan have a health bar that we have to beat down. This is why melee combat is the best method for dealing with them, as we can quickly get in multiple hits, whereas with thrown rangs or in our case bites, we have a cooldown between attacks, making dealing with even a single Quinkan take a decent amount of time. Still though, bites alone are more than enough to get us through until we eventually get given access to the Shadow Bunyip, returning from Ty 2. Just like in the last game, since this thing has no rang capabilities, as long as we're in it, no rangs will be required, making freeing the Dreaming from the Quinkan menace a simple task. As thanks to our help, Nandu offers to give Ty some special training to help him master the power of his new gauntlets. And by special training, I of course mean 3 scenes of Ty doing the same push-up animation back to back.
You look so different, Possum.
I mean, does he really? Anyway, with our training complete, Ty and Shazza decide to return back home. However, while mid-dimension hop, out of nowhere a straggler Quinkan appears and attacks, causing us to be separated. After being spat out of the portal, Ty wakes up in an unfamiliar, dilapidated place, with Quinkan around every corner. Before he can even come to grasp with what's going on, a group of zombified frills attacks him. Thankfully, before they can chow down on Ty, an unfamiliar Tasmanian tiger appears, going by the name of Ridge. He scolds Ty for being out on his own before giving us some rangs and telling us to help him protect the town. To do this, we need to take out all the Quinkan attacking the main gate. I was a bit worried about this, as some of the Quinkan are high up on the walls, well out of biting range, but luckily, if we get close to them, they're kind enough to jump down to let us deal with them. Once all of the Quinkan are dealt with and the area is safe, we can finally get some answers as to just what's going on here. It seems like when we were separated from Shazza, we were sent several months into the future and have been presumed dead for the most part. Apparently, this is Boomerangless town, or at least what's left of it, after the Quinkan attacked. Seems like when we forced them out of the Dreaming, they ended up swarming into our world and have been causing havoc ever since. Most of Southern Rivers has already fallen, and according to Ridge, Boomerangless is barely hanging on, under the leadership of Dennis. Oh yeah, by the way, get used to Dennis's stick going sicko mode like this. I don't know what the issue was, but for some reason, literally every time this stick appears in this playthrough, it was jittering around like a caffeinated child, and I have no idea what was causing it. He's one of the few remaining members of Bush Rescue still keeping up the fight, alongside Sly and Shazza, who thankfully survived after we were separated. Oh, by the way, now that Sly's back in the picture, Ridge gets basically completely sidelined. What a worthwhile addition to the canon he was. With Ty's return though, hopes are high that tides might be turning, so for our first mission, we're being sent to convince the retired members of Bush Rescue to once again take up arms with us. With this, the real game can begin, following the same mission-based setup of Ty 2. We have several missions available to us, and what order you do them in is really up to you. I'll be covering them in the way that flows best for the video, rather than the order they actually completed them in, or in what's probably most optimal gameplay-wise. First up, over at Maurice's watering hole, we can find our main man himself, Maurice. Of course, as something of a father figure to Ty, he's happy to find out that we're okay, but regardless is refusing to return to Bush Rescue, apparently due to something that Dennis did to him in our absence. He's decided to take up a career as a race car driver, so in order to snap some sense into him, we need to beat him in the big race. This is one of Ty 3's new mission types, being various forms of kart racing. Typically, I'm not massive into racing games, and this one is no exception, but luckily these segments never lasted long enough to be overly offensive. This isn't actually a proper race, and rather is more of a demolition derby. You'll need to collect as many items as you can and use them to damage the other racers to be the last one standing. Because of this, sometimes it's actually better to stay in the middle or even in last place, since it'll be easier to target opponents and harder for them to hit us. There's no power-ups based around boomerangs surprisingly, so this mission is basically a freebie. Predictably, Maurice is just even more ticked off now that we've crushed his dreams, not to mention his entire watering hole was riding on his victory. Luckily, it turns out that Dennis has come in clutch and used some of his vast fortune to buy back the watering hole and return it to Maurice, which is a kind enough gesture to convince him to rejoin Bush Rescue. Next up, we need to save Julius, who's being held captive by his nefarious uncle Carlos and being forced to work on his evil schemes. Arriving at Carlos's lair, he agrees to free Julius, but only if Ty can survive his battle arena. Despite clearly wanting us to fail, Carlos is kind enough to lend us one of his shadow bunyips, making it not only incredibly easy to survive each wave, but also not require a single ring to get through. Despite this, Carlos is still unwilling to free Julius, but thanks to us providing a good distraction, Shazza is able to free him regardless. That's 2 team members back, 1 to go. The team pilot Duke is in a bit of a pickle, having been downed and surrounded by a swarm of Quinkan. Once all of the Quinkan are dealt with, we need to escort Duke back to safety. Unfortunately, due to his injuries, he's unable to jump, meaning when we come to a bunch of swiveling platforms, we need to rotate them to create a path, and of course, bites alone won't do the trick. We need to turn 5 platforms for Duke to be able to make it across, but that's not all. Right after this, we come to a bunch of scaffolding that we need to cross, some of which needs to be lowered to make a path, and once again, bites aren't sufficient, adding 4 more required rank uses. In the area right after the scaffolding, we need to activate a series of elevating platforms by standing on these buttons, and while this doesn't require any rang uses, it's still pretty annoying, as the area above us is full of Quinkan with ranged attacks that'll pummel us as we try and stand still on the buttons. These Quinkan are the only ones that I really dreaded dealing with, as in big enough numbers, taking them out can be a nightmare, as while you try and focus on dealing with one of them, the rest is still perfectly capable of pummeling you from a distance. Hot tip, try and angle it so that the Quinkan you're attacking is standing between you and its friend, so that it can act as a bit of a shield, blocking the other enemies from attacking you. After this, it's a straight shot to the pickup site, where Duke can officially rejoin with Bush Rescue. Wait, what was that? Was that a jump? You lying twat! You're telling me I wasted ranks helping you when you were perfectly capable of jumping the entire time? With Bush Rescue now back in action, we're given access to the wider world of Southern Rivers. Just like in Ty 2, between points of interest there's a big open area for us to drive around. In Ty 2, I found these driving segments cool and a good way to expand the world, but overall a bit pointless. But in Ty 3, I actually really enjoyed these segments. The open world this time has way more going on, with Quinkan everywhere, fighting with resistance fighters, blocking roads, and setting up landmines for us to avoid, which makes traveling through these areas feel much more engaging. It also feels like we have a lot more space to explore, with tons of off-road and even water segments, whereas in Ty 2 we basically get stuck to following wherever the road led. I also just love the Crab Mercible, the new vehicle that we have for these bits. It just feels super chaotic to control, but in a really fun way, not to mention it's just so wonderfully silly to be running around Australia in a giant robot crab. Anyway, while I do enjoy these segments, they're still just a way to connect the main missions. Quinkan flying fortresses have been terrorizing the skies above Southern Rivers, and are now on a warpath to go flatten New Burramudgee, so we need to do something about it. Going to see that jerk Duke, we get given access to another new vehicle, the Gunyip, basically a fighter jet that we need to use to take down all the Quinkan's fortresses. These flying segments are just fine. I'd say I like them more than the racing missions, but still, I don't have much to say about them other than that they function, and just like all other vehicle missions, ranks aren't even an option here. Speaking of the kart races, we have another one. A group of kids calling themselves the Redback Gang has gone missing, and their parents are worried, so we're being asked to track them down. Once we find them, it turns out that they aren't as young as we were led to believe, and have taken quite the offense to being told that they need to head home, and so are challenging Ty to a race utilizing their modded kart with nuclear-powered steering. Unlike the last kart mission, this one's a proper race, and in order to win, we need to come in first. Even with the steering being a little on the sensitive side thanks to that nuclear powering, this is pretty easily done. Even if you end up way behind in the race, one of the more common power-ups is a multi-use teleporter that can easily get you back into first, making losing, honestly, more of a challenge. The Redbacks are impressed with our driving skills, but still refuse to go home, which, I mean, at this point, I don't see why I'd really care. These dudes are full-grown adults and can do what they want, to be honest. Plus, we have big issues right now. Apparently, the Quinkan are regrouping for another attack on New Burramudgee. They're being led by a Quinkan commander, so in order to stop their assault, it's time for a cheeky little assassination mission. Before we talk to Sly to get started with this mission, it's wise to check out Naomi's nearby shop, where she sells various new accessories and weapons for the bunyips, some of which are required for later missions. Money isn't really an object with how many opals you'll scoop up through passive gameplay, so just buy all of these that you can whenever you can. As for this mission, as you might have guessed, it's a Shadow Bunyip mission. Taking out the Quinkan commander is kind of annoying and time consuming, but since we have the Shadow Bunyip, no ranks are necessary. The same goes for the follow-up mission where we need to deal with a bunch of Quinkan eggs, only this time we get to play around with a new type of bunyip, the Extreme Bunyip, which is basically just Thermal Bunyip from Tie 2, but with a cool, if underutilized grapple ability. With all that done, this area of Southern Rivers has mostly been stabilized, but unfortunately, access to and communications with the rest of Southern Rivers is still impossible, meaning we don't know exactly how bad things are out there. This is thanks to a giant Quinkan known as the Hexaquin, so the next course of action is to take it out. The first phase of this fight sees us running around an arena away from the Hexaquin, trying to close gates behind us to damage it. The buttons that close the doors behind us can be activated with a bite, but getting the timing right, especially when the Hexaquin is right on your tail, can be a bit of a struggle. Still though, it is possible. Unfortunately, the rest of the fight isn't so boomerang averse, with the Hexaquin itself being immune to our bites and requiring ranks of damage, taking 6 more hits to go down. With the Hexaquin defeated, Shazza is eager to check out the previously unreachable parts of Southern Rivers, and so asks us to meet her over there. On arrival, it seems like the area is actually untouched by the Quinkan, but turns out this was just a ruse, as a group of them jump out of the shadows to kidnap Shazza. No matter how hard you chase after the Quinkan here, you can't catch up to them, and just as it seems like Ty might be able to save Shazza, he's intercepted by a hostile bunyip. Despite trying to reason with the pilot of this bunyip, it seems like they have a vendetta against Ty, and words aren't going to solve this, so the only course of action left to us is to fight them. Luckily, there's a discarded Shadow Bunyip right by where we landed. No idea how that got there, but at least this means that this is another rangless duel. After defeating the bunyip, the pilot is revealed to be none other than Fluffy, Boss Cass's right hand from the last game. Before a second round can kick up between us, Sly comes along and intervenes, reminding us that the Quinkan are a threat to both of us, and that given the situation, we should probably be working together, not fighting each other, which actually makes a lot of sense, causing an uneasy truce to be formed. The next course of action is to try and track down where the Quinkan have taken Shazza, and luckily our new friend knows someone who might have some information about that. Boss Cass. Yeah, it turns out that he's still kicking around, held up in his lair in the previously inaccessible parts of Southern Rivers. After making our way to Cassopolis and meeting with the man himself, it seems like he's worked out an arrangement with the Quinkan to maintain a semblance of power in their new world order, making it seem unlikely that he'd be willing to help us. Of course though, the Quinkan don't really have that much respect for Cass as an ally, meaning he eventually agrees to help us find Shazza in return for helping him subvert the Quinkan in his neighborhood. From this point on, Cass will be sending us on missions, and Cassopolis will act as a second hub world, complete with its own shops and oh my. Our first mission from Cass is to hunt down a Thunder Egg so that he can use it to pay for the construction of a weapon to help him fight the Quinkan. Nice, hunting down a Thunder Egg, just like old times. The Redback gang are in possession of one of these, but of course they aren't going to give it up easily, and so are challenging Ty to another race. Just like the last race with these guys, winning is pretty easy, but that's not all that we have to do here. We also need to pick up every Thunder Egg chunk scattered around the map before the race ends. This wouldn't be too bad, but sometimes I found these chunks just wouldn't collect, even when I'm certain that I drove right through them. You do have 3 chances to collect each one of these, since the race is 3 laps long, but by the 3rd lap you really want to have them all so that you can focus on getting into first. Still though, it's more than doable. The Redback gang aren't done with us yet though, figuring that if they can't beat us in a race, maybe they can defeat us in a destruction derby. They could not. Back in Cassopolis, the Quinkan have caught on to Cass's little rebellion, and so have cut off the power generators, keeping the lights on, so we have to go give them a kickstart. This is as easy as shooting them with the Shadow Bunyip's energy blasts until they power back up, and outside of another Quinkan commander battle, no roadblocks really present themselves. Apparently though, the Quinkan are super invested in shutting off Cass's power, as they pull this exact same stunt again later, and we need to do basically the same mission a second time, only this time in the Extreme Bunyip rather than the Shadow Bunyip. After this mission, we get a glimpse of Shazza being held captive by the Quinkan. After managing to slip away from her captors for a minute, she overhears one of the zombified frills, apparently being possessed by a being calling itself the Queen King. It seems like the Quinkan are looking for something in Southern Rivers, a powerful weapon that could defeat them, and that if they held would make them nearly unstoppable. Unfortunately, that's all the information that she can gather before she's found out and recaptured. Back in Ty's shoes, Boss Cass has another task for us. He needs to get something he calls a Robo-Bug into Southern Rivers, and has decided that we would make the perfect meat shield to protect it from the Quinkan. We aren't really given any reason why he needs this Robo-Bug, or even told what it is, but oh well, I guess this is happening regardless. This is another Gunyip mission, only this time we need to clear a path and deal with the Quinkan defenses in order to keep the Robo-Bug safe. The Gunyip's bombs take a second to reload after being shot, and since they're the best way of clearing most of the Quinkan here, it can take quite a while, but even if the bug does take a few hits, it's really durable, so this isn't that hard. Taking a break from helping Cass, Maurice has some intel that Carlos has reopened his fighting arena, and it would probably be best to go see what he's up to. Arriving, Carlos has been expecting us, and challenges us to face a few rounds in the ring, and seemingly based on nothing other than not wanting to be called chicken, Ty accepts. This is the first time in a while that we've actually had to fight Quinkan on foot. For the most part, they aren't too hard to take out, the only annoying part being the Quinkan with ranged energy blasts sniping you from a distance as you try and deal with their friends. If things do get too hairy, the arena is covered in exploding boxes that Ty can safely activate with a bite, and that will insta-kill any Quinkan around, making this arena a walk in the park. Right after this, we have another on-foot mission. One of Cass's dropships has crashed on Kakaboom Island, and on board was a device that he needs for reasons that he keeps suspiciously vague. Apparently, we're meeting someone over there to help us with the mission, and on arrival, who should we find there but Dennis, loaded up with a straight-up rocket launcher. Damn, I thought Shazza having a gun was crazy. Where the hell are these animals getting firearms in Australia anyway? For the most part, we can just run straight past the Quinkan here to find the crashed dropship in the water. Unfortunately, after swimming down, we discover that it's being guarded by a giant hermit crab, and in order to safely retrieve it, we need to deal with this thing. Even if this thing was vulnerable to bites, while underwater, we're limited to just throwing our rangs, leaving us no other option. This boss fight is at least insanely easy. There's a sweet spot far enough away from the boss that it won't be able to attack us, but that's still in range of our rangs, letting us just wail on it until it eventually goes down. After all of our hard work, Cass has finally managed to track down Shazza. Apparently, she's being held right outside of Cassopolis. Really? Took you that long to figure that out? She's being guarded by another giant Quinkan called the Dragon Quinn. Being a flying beast, the only way that we have to fight this thing is in the Gunyip, meaning unlike the Hexaquin, this one requires no rangs, letting us easily reunite with Shazza. With Shazza back at Bush Rescue, she fills us in on what she's managed to figure out about the Quinking and the ancient weapon that might be able to defeat him. According to Maurice, there's a lizard living in the nearby town of Thylacine, who's rumoured to be a bit of a Quinkan expert, and who might know more about the whole thing, but without missing a beat, Ty's parents walk in to inform us that he's gone missing, so we need to go track him down from his last known location, and for good measure, Shazza and Fluffy agree to come along too. Just like most of the on-foot point-to-point missions, fighting Quinkan is completely optional, and it's much faster to just run past them to get to the objective. This mission does manage to get kinda confusing though. At a certain point, Fluffy and Shazza will just stop following Ty and just stand around. We can continue on, but when we reach the Quinkan expert, no cutscene plays to tell us what to do next. There's a turret and a bunch of Quinkan floating about, but getting into the turret and shooting them does nothing. I assumed that this was a glitch and restarted the mission, but the same thing just happened again. Turns out though, this isn't a glitch, it's just kind of poorly explained what we have to do next. You're meant to get into that turret and start dealing with the flying Quinkan, but simply clicking on them isn't enough. You need to spam the mouse as fast as you can to increase the power of the turret. My finger was seriously hurting after this. I have no idea why they made the turret work this way. Once the area is safe, we learn that the Quinkan expert is none other than Gubu Steve. Oh yeah, I don't think I mentioned him last time. He was an incredibly minor NPC in Ty 2, who you could find hiding in out-of-the-way locations, and when talked to would go on about something he called them. In that game, it was easy to write this off as him rambling, but now it's become apparent that he was warning us about the Quinkan this entire time. He tells us that the last time the Quinkan attacked, he was able to defeat them using something called the Shadow Ring and Shadow Stones, which he's buried somewhere on Kakaboon Island, so now we need to go find them. Before that though, a few more things have popped up around Southern Rivers. Apparently, the Quinkan haven't yet realized that we already made contact with Steve, and so are launching a full-force assault on his old hideout of Thylacine. This is another Gunyip mission where we need to take out flying fortresses, and well, I've said it before, and I'll probably say it again. As long as we're in a vehicle, no rangs are needed. It's the same story for the next Redback race. This time, they want a one-on-one race, as in the one of us versus the one of the three of them, as well as all the other races in the race. You know, one-on-one. We're also not allowed to use items this time around, which is a restriction that they're not limited by. Whatever, unfairness of these terms aside, the race is still a cakewalk, so I'm not complaining. With that handled, we're now being sent to retrieve the Shadow Ring and Shadow Stones along with Fluffy. This alone time gives Fluffy and Tai a good chance to bond, with Fluffy seeming to be coming around on this whole good guy thing, even going as far as to call Tai her friend. Okay, seems like a pretty sudden and major change of heart, but not like that would be a first time for this series, and I'm always down for a good hero to villain arc anyway. The 3 pieces of the Shadow Ring are being held by 3 Quinkan commanders around Kakaboom Island. This time we don't have the Shadow Bunyip, so in order to take them out we need to use those bloody carpal tunnel turrets again. God, I hate these things. I had to stop playing after this segment with how sore my hand was getting from spam clicking. Eventually though, I was able to take out all the commanders and restore the Shadow Ring. The Shadow Stones are a bit of a different story though. While Fluffy is able to find and retrieve them in a weirdly paced and shot cutscene that can only be described as a series of unfortunate events, they end up dropped into a volcano and launched out all over southern rivers, so our next job is to track them down. Once back from Kakaboom Island, we get word that Carlos has once again challenged us to a battle in his arena, only this time we have a pretty good reason to take him up on this offer, as he's found and is wagering one of the Shadow Stones on this fight. Unlike the last battle arena, this one isn't on foot, and rather throws us into the extreme bunyip, and say it with me now, when we're in a vehicle, no rangs are required, making scoring our first Shadow Stone a walk in the park. Now though, we have another matter to deal with, as apparently the Redback gang are causing more trouble. They've stolen one of Dennis's Thunder Eggs, and so we need to get it back for him. Doesn't really seem like the time for this kind of thing, but whatever. I guess Dennis is still the leader of Bush Rescue, so we gotta keep him happy. Well, it's a good thing that we didn't blow this one off, as it turns out that the Redbacks have also come into possession of one of the Shadow Stones, and of course, they're only willing to part with it if we can beat them in a race. This is another race where we need to collect Thunder Egg fragments, and the issue where we couldn't collect them even if we drove straight through them is even more prevalent this time. This one on the grind rail is especially annoying, and frequently killed my attempts, but eventually everything came together and I was able to claim the second Shadow Stone. The Redbacks have another mission for us where we need to track down their nuclear-powered cart before the Quinkan can find it and use it as a weapon, but this one is pretty uneventful and doesn't even give us a Shadow Stone. The final Shadow Stone has actually already been tracked down by Ranger Ken, but when we go to get it from him, a Quinkan manages to snatch it away and we have to chase it down. Even when we get held up fighting other Quinkan, this thing doesn't take the chance to get away and just waits for us to get done, so it's not that hard to catch up and collect the final Shadow Stone. With the final stone in hand, it's time to take on the Quink King. Tai tries to slip off by himself, but Sly shows up to make sure that he doesn't have to do this alone.
Wish me luck!
You won't need luck, rat boy. I'm coming with you.
Oh, I guess Fluffy's coming too.
So you 3 are going to need me to make sure you reach the Quinking in one piece.
And Shazza, I guess. Anyone else want to come help? Hope you guys weren't planning on leaving without me. Despite all the displays of support, the Quinkan have sabotaged the transport, carrying the rest of the gang, and now are coming to finish them off. Tai considers going back to help them, but just in time, the Redback gang comes along to finally help out a little, meaning we're free to go for the big fish. First up, we have a Gunyip mission, which is just as easy as all of them, and at the end, we pass through a portal into the Queen King's realm. The rest of the gang joins Tai just in time for the final fight, but Tai once again insists on going alone, saying that the Shadow Ring can only be wielded by one person.
Never thought I'd be sad to see you go.
Possum, be careful. I don't want to lose you again.
Guys, I can't believe what I'm hearing. Tai is our best friend. You can't let him face this alone. After another brief path swarmed with Quinkan that we can just easily walk straight past, we come face to face with the Queen King himself, who's managed to capture and possess Boss Cass to use as his mouthpiece. Tai tells the Queen King that his time is through, and that no one wants him here in Southern Rivers, to which he reveals that in fact the Quinkan didn't just happen upon our world by mistake. They were invited here by none other than Boss Cass, who hope to utilize their power to take over the world. The time for talk is over though, as the Queen King has taken the form of the ultimate creature for our final battle. This thing. This battle is based for the most part around the new combat system, with any hits only doing a small sliver of damage to incentivize the speed of melee combat. Bites can still work though, but they come with a ton of downsides. First off, 90% of your attacks will be blocked by the Queen King, and he can also do a quick counter attack to deal some damage on us. On average, I was only able to get 1 to 3 hits in before he managed to knock me out, which is nowhere near enough given how little damage each bite does. The solution to this is jump bites, a move that for the most part in the series up until now has been completely useless. Not only does he seem to struggle blocking these attacks more than standard bites, but also while we're in the air, he can't as effectively counter us. I did still take some damage, but even then this was more than enough to get him into the second phase, which gives us a checkpoint. Unfortunately, this is the end of our bite's effectiveness, as he gains a glowing shield that blocks all damage from our teeth. This shield can be deactivated with a single swipe at the Shadow Ring, at which point bites do regain their effectiveness, but you still shouldn't use them. After 2 bites, which barely does any damage, the shield will just go back up. The shield will also go back up if we hit him again with the Shadow Ring, but this does way more damage than 2 bites, meaning overall it will require less rank uses, 6 total. You can get this down to 5, but the method for this is kinda sketchy. sketchy. If you take down the shield and then get taken out by the Quinking, his health will restore, but not the shield, meaning we won't need to drop it for the first hit of damage, but since this still requires a rang use just on a previous life, I can't fairly count it. After this, the Quinking shifts into its final form, this giant T-Rex looking thing. This is a much more standard boss setup. Dodge the attacks so the weak spot becomes vulnerable and hit it, and unfortunately this time bites aren't an option at all. We're limited to just throne rangs, 3 of which will be required to finish this thing off. Things still aren't over though, as while we were busy dealing with the Quinking, Cass managed to shake off of its control and capture all of our friends.
This is low, even for you.
Don't you dare hurt him!
Let me go!
He forgot to tie me up. Not really sure what I should do here, guys. Just before Cass can finally take us out, Fluffy manages to shake free of her restraints and jumps in front of Cass's laser, sacrificing herself to save the day, as well as her newfound friends. With the Quinking defeated, normality and peace is once again restored to the land down under. As a sign of the healing between cold and warm-blooded animals, Fluffy is memorialized for her sacrifice in the center of New Burramudgee. So, can you beat Tie 3 Night of the Quinkan Boomerangless? No, not quite, but we didn't do too bad either, especially considering how early the rang uses got started this time around. It took a total of 32 rang uses to get through, more than Tie 2, but still significantly less than the first game. That's not all that surprising, as Tie 3 is even more heavily focused on vehicle missions than Tie 2 was, giving even less chances for rangs to even come into the picture. I think this is probably the biggest problem with this game, as for the most part, we don't actually play as Tie. Sure, there's the occasional on-foot mission, but most of them just see us going from bunyip to gunyip to cart to crab, and while none of these forms of gameplay are bad, it kind of feels like it doesn't have a core gameplay it's building off of. Despite the gameplay being a bit more disappointing this time around, the story was a vast improvement. I mean, it's not Shakespeare or anything, but it was much more engaging and in-depth than anything the previous games had going on. In any case, I had a good time with this one. So, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Please don't forget to give it a like if you did, and consider subscribing for more videos like this in the future. Until next time, I've been Katie Cat, and thank you for watching.